Now, China's military is carrying out live fire exercises near its border with Myanmar over concerns about the deteriorating security situation there. There has been fierce fighting in a civil war between Myanmar's military regime and ethnic armed groups. Henry Storey is an Asia-focused political risk analyst. He says a tenuous ceasefire brokered by Beijing in January has fallen apart and clashes have escalated.
Since October last year, in fact, the junta, the Tatmadaw, in Myanmar have progressively lost control of most areas of the border, on the Chinese border that is. And that most of those areas in the key trading posts at the moment are currently being controlled by ethnic armed organisations, some of which have links with China, but in no sense are ciphers of the Chinese and not exactly controlled by the Chinese in a definitive sense. And I think what we've seen at the moment is China is trying to signal its impatience with the junta, because the junta, having lost most of these areas, has in recent days and weeks been conducting airstrikes in these areas, which China's, I think, gravest fear in this sense is that the conflict could spill over into Yunnan province, which it has in the past in the form of refugees and stray shells which have flown over the border.
What is the significance of China's live fire drills on the border there at the moment, and could there be more to come on that?
Yeah, I think what they're really trying to do is they're trying to get the junta to stand down and to resume negotiations with these ethnic armed organisations, which are currently controlling most of these areas. China has been trying to, without a huge amount of success at this stage, has been trying to force both sides to enter into negotiations to ensure, I suppose, a more stable situation on its border.
And what are China's interests in Myanmar?
So I think they're threefold. So first of all, China, as we've just been talking about, is very keen to ensure the stability of its border areas. The second, I think, primary interest that China has is advancing Belt and Road projects in Myanmar. And those are primarily, at this stage, a deep water port in Rakhine State on the Indian Ocean, which China hopes will help diversify its energy supplies, particularly away from over-reliance on the Straits of Malacca, which China fears it might not be able to control in a conflict. The third interest, I would say, is keeping Western powers out of Myanmar. There's been a long-standing paranoia, I think, in Chinese strategic circles about the possibility of the US or another power gaining a foothold in Myanmar, especially because those areas around northern Myanmar on the Chinese border have traditionally been very porous.
Can you tell us a bit more about this Three Brotherhood Alliance offensive launched last year, and could it see the fall of the military regime there?
Yeah, so the Three Brotherhood Alliance have a degree of backing and support from China. I'd say it's more tacit rather than overt. And China has always been, I think, fairly hesitant about large-scale military exercises or operations on its border. But in this case, I think they consented to the Three Brotherhood Alliance operation, because one of the main aims of that operation in October last year was to dislodge a series of cyber scam centres which had popped up on the Chinese border. Many Chinese nationals had been victims of these scams, and I think people were living in quite horrific conditions and were, again, trying to scam people from the Chinese side to come and be, I think, almost kidnapped in these centres. But I don't think that this will precipitate in any way the fall of the junta. The Three Brotherhood Alliance, typically its interests in Myanmar have been much more parochial. It's more concerned with carving out, I suppose, what you might describe as fiefdoms, which the different constituent parts of the Three Brotherhood Alliance will control. They traditionally have not been particularly interested in marching on Yangon or Naypyidaw, and although there has been a level of support provided to rebel groups or tactical cooperation, I don't think in any sense these groups are in a fully fledged alliance with the NLD or NUG or forces which are still loyal to the previous democratic government.
And so with this deteriorating situation on the China-Myanmar border, how precarious a situation is this, especially when we have these live drills going on at the moment?
So I think, yeah, certainly the situation is precarious, but it's not the first time that we've seen China flexing its muscles on the border. I think, essentially telling both sides to de-escalate. I think the ethnic armed organisations are fairly well established on their side of the border. I think it would be a stretch at this stage for the junta to try and retake control over these areas. So yeah, it's certainly a precarious situation, but I don't think there's about to be a major conflagration on China's border. I think the junta, as I said, would be hard pressed to retake these orders, retake these border towns at this stage.
Political risk analyst Henry Storey, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.